Scientists have pinpointed almost exactly when humans started wearing clothes, not roughly. Almost exactly, the answer is 170,000 years ago, which means for the first 130,000 years of our existence as a species, we were completely naked. And the reason we finally covered up was so strange that researchers debated it for decades before they found proof hidden in the most unexpected place imaginable: body lice. Here is the thing about body lice. They are not the same as head lice. Head lice live in your hair and have lived there for millions of years, long before we were even recognizably human. Body lice are different. Body lice need fabric. They can only survive in clothing nestled into the folds of material pressed against warm skin. Without clothes, body lice cannot exist, which means the moment body lice evolved as a separate species from head lice, humans must have already been wearing something. So in 2003, a team of researchers led by geneticist Mark Stonking at the Max Planck Institute did something nobody had thought to try. They dated the evolutionary split between head lice and body lice, and the answer came back 170,000 years ago. That is when clothing began, not with a fossil, not with cave art, with a parasite, but that only answers when. The harder question is why. For the first 130,000 years of our existence, modern humans lived in Africa, and not the cold parts, the parts that sit close to the equator, where temperatures regularly hit 35 degrees Celsius and the sun doesn't negotiate. Nakedness made sense there. It still makes sense there. Your skin is one of the most sophisticated cooling systems ever evolved: 2 to 4 million sweat glands, the highest density of any primate on Earth, all working together to keep your core temperature stable. Clothes would have made that worse. So for most of human prehistory, covering up wasn't progress, it was a problem. Which means the first clothing was not about survival, not directly. It was about something else entirely. Around 170,000 years ago, something happened in Africa that changed everything. The planet entered a glacial period. Not an ice age exactly, not in Africa, but temperatures dropped, rainfall patterns shifted. The lush landscapes that had sustained human populations for tens of thousands of years began to dry out. Food became scarce. Water became scarce. Some researchers believe the human population dropped to as few as 10,000 individuals during this period. Possibly fewer, we nearly went extinct. And it was during this bottleneck, this brutal narrowing of the human story, that something shifted. We started covering ourselves. The first materials were almost certainly animal skins, not sewn, not shaped, not anything resembling a garment as we would recognize it. Just a hide draped over a shoulder held against the body. It kept the wind off. It held warmth in at night when temperatures in even tropical Africa could plunge. It was enough. For a species teetering on the edge of extinction, enough was everything. But here is where it gets interesting, because once we had clothing, clothing started doing something nobody planned for. It started doing something to us socially. In every hunter-gatherer society that anthropologists have studied, clothing is never just clothing. The Hadza of Tanzania, one of the closest living examples of how early humans organized themselves, used body decoration to signal group identity, status, and readiness for specific social roles. The specific beads you wear, the specific pigments on your skin, the specific way you arrange what covers your body. None of it is random. All of it is communication. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner, who spent decades studying the Kalahari Bushmen, documented that personal ornamentation served as what she called a social safety net. The decorations you wore told people in distant camps who you were, what group you belonged to, and what obligations you carried. In a world without writing, without roads, without any of the systems we use to identify ourselves, what you wore on your body was your identity. It was your passport, your business card, and your reputation all at once. This changes everything about why we really started wearing clothes. Because clothing didn't just protect the body, it created the social body. The moment humans started covering and decorating themselves, they created a new kind of information layer that sat on top of the biological one. You could now look at a person and know things about them before they spoke, before they acted, before you had any history with them at all. And that capacity to read a stranger instantly, to know their tribe, their status, their alliances from a single glance is something that runs so deep in us now that we do it without thinking. Every morning when you choose what to wear, you are participating in a system that is 170,000 years old. You are still sending the same signals, still trying to tell the world who you are before you open your mouth. But there is a darker layer underneath all of this, and it involves something most historians skip over entirely. Clothing didn't just communicate identity. It began to enforce it. Once you could signal group membership through what you wore, you could also signal who did not belong. And once you could identify outsiders visually, something ancient and ugly in human psychology took over. Anthropologists studying the transition from nakedness to clothing note that in virtually every culture where clothing emerged, emerged, it was quickly followed by rules. Rules about who could wear what, rules about what certain garments meant, rules about what happened to people who wore the wrong thing. The history of clothing is inseparable from the history of hierarchy. What you were allowed to cover was determined by who had power over you. In ancient Rome, only emperors could wear full purple garments. A dye cost more than gold. The law enforced it. In feudal Japan, sumptuary laws dictated the fabric, color, and style permitted to each class. Peasants caught wearing silk faced punishment in virtually every stratified society that has ever existed. Clothing has been used to mark the distance between those at the top and those at the bottom, and the instinct behind that system is not modern. It did not emerge with civilization. It emerged 170,000 years ago on an African savanna. The moment the first person draped a skin over their shoulder and the person next to them noticed, we have been reading each other's clothing ever since. And here is what nobody talks about. The anxiety you feel about what to wear is not vanity. It is not superficiality. It is an ancient social alarm. The same alarm that fired in your ancestors when they needed to signal the right group membership to survive. Getting it wrong didn't just mean embarrassment for most of human history. Getting it wrong meant exclusion. And exclusion, as we explored before, was the functional equivalent of a death sentence. Your nervous system still remembers that every morning when you stand in front of your wardrobe and feel that low, unreasonable pressure about what to put on, you are feeling the echo of 170,000 years of social survival. The stakes are not what they were, but the signal is exactly the same. We started wearing clothes because we were cold and desperate and nearly extinct. We kept wearing them because they let us talk without speaking. We turned them into a language so complex that entire industries now exist just to help people say the right thing without words. Fashion is not a modern invention. Fashion is the oldest human broadcast system still running. And every morning, without thinking about it at all, you tune in, the first person to wear clothing almost certainly had no idea what they were starting. They were just trying to stay warm through one more night. They had no concept of identity or status or social signaling. They had a skin and a cold wind and a decision to make. But somewhere in that small, desperate act, they handed the species something it would never put down. The ability to say, without a single word, this is who I am, this is where I belong. We have been saying it every single day since you said it this morning. You will say it again tomorrow, and you will never stop